Imagine this. You're lying in bed, the world outside is still, and then, out of nowhere, a knock echoes through the darkness. Not from the door, not from the window, but from the wall beside you. What would you do? Ignore it? Or dig deeper? I'm sharing this story with you because it's more than just a creepy tale. It's a window into how we face the unknown, how we confront the walls in our lives, literal or not. It's about an old woman named Agnes who heard that knock and chose to act. Her journey might chill you, but it'll also make you think. Stick with me, it's worth it. Agnes had called that old Victorian house her home for over 50 years. It stood at the edge of town, its gabled roof sagging like tired shoulders, its windows cloudy with age. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and dust, a blend of comfort and neglect. She was a small woman, her silver hair twisted into a tight bun, her eyes sharp despite the lines etched around them. Every evening, she'd settle into her rocking chair by the fireplace, knitting under the flicker of a single lamp. The house had its own voice, creaking floorboards, groaning pipes, but Agnes knew its rhythms. It was her refuge, the last thread tying her to George, her husband, gone 10 years now. That Tuesday night felt ordinary at first. The clock ticked past 9, and Agnes was midway through a scarf for her granddaughter, Lily. The fire popped softly, casting shadows that stretched across the faded floral wallpaper. Then it came a knock, not from the door or the windows, but from the wall behind her. 3 sharp raps, crisp and deliberate, like a guest announcing themselves. She froze, her knitting needles stilled in midair. Her gaze snapped to the wall, the one that divided her living room from George's old study. She hadn't crossed that threshold since he died. The door stayed locked, the key tucked away, the room a silent shrine to his memory. She held her breath, waiting. Silence reclaimed the space. Old houses, she murmured, forcing a shaky smile. Always settling. But the knocks didn't let her off that easy. Wednesday night, they returned, 3 raps, louder, more insistent. Agnes set her knitting aside and shuffled over, her slippers scuffing the rug. She pressed her ear to the cool plaster. Nothing. She tapped back, tap, 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 mimicking the sound. The wall stayed quiet. A chill prickled her skin, but she brushed it off. Houses make noises, she told herself. That's all. Thursday night shattered that excuse. 3 booming knocks jolted her upright in her chair. Her heart raced, echoing the rhythm. She stared at the wall, its faded flowers glaring back like accusing eyes. This wasn't settling beams or wind. It felt alive, purposeful. Agnes wasn't the type to leap to ghost stories. She'd spent her life grounded, mending clothes, tending roses, keeping her world small and safe. But this gnawed at her logic. She grabbed the phone and called Mr. Jenkins, her neighbor, a retired carpenter with a gruff voice and a knack for fixing things. Knocks on the wall, he said, skepticism thick in his tone. Pipes, Agnes. Or maybe a squirrel. Don't lose sleep over it. He chuckled, a sound meant to reassure. Thanks, Harold, she replied, hanging up. But she wasn't convinced. The knocks were too precise, too human. That night, she lay awake, the house shrouded in shadow. Midnight chimed, and there they were, 3 knocks, thunderous, vibrating through the wall downstairs. She sat up, clutching the quilt. Her mind spun. A spirit? A prank? Or was she unraveling? A week crept by, and the knocks became her constant companion. Every night, 3 raps, louder each time, a drumbeat she couldn't ignore. Her knitting lay abandoned, her hands too unsteady. Sleep faded into restless hours, her thoughts tangled in questions. What was behind that wall? Why now, after all these years? One evening, she'd had enough. She retrieved the key from its hiding spot, a tin box in the pantry, and unlocked George's study. The door groaned open, releasing a cloud of dust. The room was frozen in time, his desk piled with papers, shelves heavy with books, a faint trace of pipe tobacco lingering. She stepped inside, her breath shallow, and stood by the wall. She knocked 3 times, a challenge. Silence answered. Back in the living room, she sank into her chair. As if mocking her, the wall knocked back 3 times, sharp and clear. Her chest tightened. This wasn't in her head. Something was there, reaching out. Now, before I go further, let me pause and say, thank you all for being here. This channel's growing faster than I ever imagined, and it's because of you. If you're enjoying Agnes's story so far, please hit that subscribe button to catch more tales like this. Okay, back to our friend. Agnes sat there, the wall looming like a riddle. She could ignore it, let it chip away at her sanity, or she could confront it. The idea of tearing into that plaster, cracking open her home, her past, sent a shiver through her. She was 78, her strength waning, not built for swinging hammers. But living with this fear, this unanswered call, that was a heavier burden. Those knocks weren't just noise. They were a wake-up call, a nudge from the universe, or maybe from George. Life's funny that way, isn't it? Sometimes it taps on your walls, daring you to look closer. Agnes thought of George's voice, steady and warm. You're stronger than you think, Aggie. Maybe he'd want her to face this. Maybe this was her moment to dig deep, to break through the barriers she'd built around herself. By morning, her mind was made up. She'd tear down the wall. She didn't know what waited, answers, danger, or just more questions, but she couldn't live in the dark anymore. The knocks had stirred something in her, a fire she'd thought long extinguished. Tomorrow, she'd gather tools from the shed, a sledgehammer, a crowbar, whatever her old hands could manage. Tomorrow, she'd step into the unknown. She didn't realize it yet, but that wall wasn't just hiding a mystery. It was a mirror, reflecting a truth she'd buried deep. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting a soft glow over the living room. Agnes stood by the window, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea, staring at the wall. It looked so ordinary in the daylight, plaster and paint, nothing more. But she knew better. Last night's knocks still echoed in her bones, a reminder that something waited behind it, something that refused to be ignored. She took a sip of tea, the warmth steadying her. Today was the day. She'd made up her mind, and Agnes wasn't one to back down once she'd set her course. But doubt lingered, like a shadow at the edge of her thoughts. What if there was nothing there? What if she was chasing ghosts, tearing apart her home for no reason? Or worse, what if there was something she wasn't ready to face? She shook her head. No use fretting, she muttered. Better to know than to wonder. That's a truth I've learned the hard way, friends. Curiosity might scare you silly, but ignorance? That's a slow poison. Agnes had spent too many years playing it safe, locking away the messy parts of herself. Maybe this was her chance to break free, to face whatever was knocking. Setting the mug down, she shuffled to the shed behind the house. The door creaked open, revealing a mess of rusted tools and cobwebs. She grabbed a sledgehammer, its weight surprising her. Could she even swing this thing? Her hands weren't what they used to be, but grit has a strength all its own. She added a crowbar and a flashlight to her pile, then headed back inside. The living room felt different now, buzzing with anticipation. She laid the tools on the rug and stood before the wall, her heart thumping. For a second, she thought about calling Harold again, maybe asking for backup. But this felt personal, like a fight she had to take on solo. Harold would just laugh, say she was being ridiculous. Maybe she was. But sometimes, ridiculous is just courage in disguise. She picked up the sledgehammer, its handle rough against her palms. She took a deep breath, then swung. The hammer hit the wall with a dull thud, leaving a small dent. She swung again, harder. Plaster cracked, dust puffing out like a sigh. Again and again, she struck, each blow ringing through the house. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her arms ached, but she didn't stop. It felt good, almost freeing, like she was smashing through more than just a wall. Finally, a chunk of plaster fell away, revealing a dark gap. She dropped the hammer, panting, and peered inside. The space was narrow, barely wide enough for a person, but it stretched back farther than she could see. A hidden passage? In her house? She grabbed the flashlight and shone it into the void. The beam caught on cobwebs and something else, a wooden box, tucked into a recess. Her breath hitched. She reached in, her fingers brushing the box's surface. It was old, the wood smooth and cool. She pulled it out carefully, holding it like it might break. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, she studied it. No lock, just a simple latch. She hesitated, a shiver of fear crawling up her spine. What if this was a mistake? What if some doors should stay shut? But she'd come too far to chicken out now. With a click, she flipped the latch and lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of letters, yellowed and tied with a faded ribbon. On top sat a photograph, her and George, young and grinning, standing in front of this house. She hadn't seen that picture in years. Her throat tightened as she untied the ribbon and picked up the first letter. It was George's handwriting, dated a few months before he passed. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. My dearest Aggie, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. There are things I never told you, things I couldn't say. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want to burden you. This house holds secrets, ones I discovered too late. The wall, it's not what it seems. There's a space behind it, a place where the past lingers. I heard the knocks too, Aggie. I ignored them, and I regret it. Don't make my mistake. Face it, whatever it is. You're stronger than you know. Yours always, George. Tears stung her eyes. George had known. He'd heard the knocks, felt the same unease, but he'd kept it to himself. Why hadn't he told her? Why leave her to stumble into this alone? Anger flared, then softened into sadness. He'd been shielding her, in his quiet way. But shields can trap you just as much as they save you. She flipped through the other letters, more from George, some from strangers, all hinting at the house's past. One mentioned a previous owner, a recluse who'd vanished without a trace. Another described odd noises, a presence lurking in the walls. Agnes's skin prickled. How had she lived here so long, oblivious? The last letter stopped her cold. It was undated, the handwriting shaky, almost desperate. To whoever finds this, the knocks are a warning. Do not ignore them. There's something here, something old and hungry. It feeds on fear, on silence. Break the wall, but be ready. It won't let go easily. No signature, no name. Just those words, raw and haunting. Agnes leaned back, her mind spinning. Was this for real? Or some twisted joke? But the knocks, the letters, they fit too perfectly. She thought of George, his steady presence, his hidden fears. Maybe that's why he'd locked the study, why he'd stayed quiet. He'd been scared, too. She glanced at the hole in the wall, the dark passage calling to her. Part of her wanted to patch it up, pretend she'd never found the box. But another part, the part that still loved George, that still ached for him, knew she couldn't. He'd left her this path, this shot at the truth. She owed it to him, to herself, to follow it. Standing, she grabbed the flashlight and aimed it back into the passage. It seemed to go on, curving slightly right. Was there more? She took a step forward, then paused. The air inside was colder, musty, like a grave. Her nerve flickered. Maybe she should wait, figure this out later. But waiting was what had kept her stuck all these years. Waiting for George to return, waiting for life to feel whole again. No more. She stepped into the passage, the floor creaking under her. The walls pressed close, grazing her shoulders, and the darkness ate up the flashlight's beam after a few feet. She crept forward, each step a quiet battle. The passage twisted, pulling her deeper into the house's secrets. Then, ahead, she saw it, a door, half rotted, paint flaking off. Her pulse raced. She reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. She pushed harder, and with a groan, the door gave way. The room beyond was tiny, windowless, lit only by her flashlight. In the center sat a rocking chair, a twin to the one in her living room. And in it was a figure, hunched, still, cloaked in shadows. Agnes gasped, staggering back. The figure didn't stir. She swung the light onto it, her hand trembling. It was a mannequin, dressed in a ragged gown, its face painted with a warped smile. Cobwebs tangled in its hair, and in its lap rested a book, open to a page of frantic scribbles. She inched closer, breathing shallow. The book was a journal, the same shaky handwriting as the last letter. She read the first line. "It's here. It's always been here. And now it knows I know." A chill sank into her bones. She snapped the book shut, her heart hammering. This was too much. She needed air, needed to think. But as she turned to go, she heard it. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, from the walls around her. The passage door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the tiny room. Agnes spun around, her flashlight beam jittering across the walls. Darkness swallowed the space, thick and suffocating. She grabbed the door handle, yanking it with all her strength, but it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at her throat. She was trapped. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she pressed her back against the door, the cold wood biting through her sweater. The mannequin sat motionless in the rocking chair, its painted smile mocking her. The journal lay in its lap, pages open like an invitation or a trap. Agnes's mind raced. How had the door closed? Was someone else here? Or was it something else? She forced herself to calm down, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. "Think, Aggie," she whispered. "Panic won't help. Here's a little wisdom, friends. Fear's a loud roommate, but it doesn't pay rent. You've got to quiet it down to hear your own voice." Agnes steadied herself, focusing on the faint hum of her heartbeat. She swung the flashlight around the room, searching for another way out. The walls were solid, no windows, no vents. Just the door, stubbornly shut. She'd have to find a way to force it open. But first she needed to understand what she was dealing with. The journal, maybe it held answers. With trembling hands, she approached the mannequin and snatched the book from its lap. The cover was worn, the pages brittle. She flipped back to the first entry, dated decades ago. September 12th, 1952. The knocks started tonight. 3 raps, always 3. I thought it was the neighbor, but no one's there. The wall feels wrong, like it's watching me. I'm not crazy. Something's in this house. Agnes's stomach twisted. 1952, that was before she and George bought the place. The house had a history, one they'd never known. She turned the page. October 3rd, 1952. I found the passage today. Behind the wall in the study. There's a room, hidden. It's not on the blueprints. I don't know what to make of it. The knocks are louder now, like they're calling me. A chill ran down her spine. So the passage wasn't a secret to everyone. Someone else had found it, felt the same pull. She skipped ahead, the handwriting growing more frantic. November 15th, 1952. It's not just knocks anymore. I hear whispers scratching. It wants something from me. I try to leave, but the door won't open. I'm trapped. God help me, I'm trapped. The last entry was a single line, scrawled in a shaky hand. It's here. Agnes snapped the journal shut, her skin crawling. Whoever wrote this had been in this very room, trapped like she was now. Had they escaped? Or... She glanced at the mannequin, its lifeless eyes staring back. A horrible thought crept in. Was this more than just a dummy? She shook her head. No, that was ridiculous. It was just a creepy old prop, nothing more. But the knocks, the whispers, those were real. And now she was locked in, just like the journal's author. She had to get out. Fast. She grabbed the crowbar she'd brought and jammed it into the doorframe, prying with all her might. The wood groaned, but held firm. She tried again, sweat beading on her forehead. Nothing. Frustration boiled over. She pounded on the door, shouting, "Let me out. Someone, anyone." But the house stayed silent, indifferent. She was alone, or so she thought. Then, from the walls, came a soft scratching, like nails dragging across plaster. She froze, her breath catching. The sound moved, circling the room, growing louder. It was as if something was inside the walls, pacing, waiting. Agnes backed away, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer, just the scratching, insistent, closer. She swung the flashlight wildly, but there was nothing to see. Just shadows and dust. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. Silence pressed in, heavy and oppressive. Then 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, right behind her. She whirled around, but there was only the wall. Her nerve broke. She lunged for the door, clawing at it, desperate to escape. That's when she heard it, a whisper, faint but clear, like a breath against her ear. Agnes. She stumbled back, her blood turning to ice. It knew her name. How? What was this thing? She pressed herself against the far wall, her mind reeling. This wasn't just a house settling or a prank. This was something else, something that had been here all along, lurking in the shadows. In that moment, a memory surfaced, sharp and vivid. It was a conversation with George, years ago, not long after they'd moved in. They were sitting in the study, unpacking boxes, when he'd paused, his brow furrowed. "Do you ever feel like this house is watching us?" he'd asked, half joking. She'd laughed, brushing it off. "It's just old, George. Full of character." He'd smiled, but his eyes stayed distant. "Yeah, character. That's it." Now, she wondered, had he sensed something even then? Had he known about the passage, the room, the knocks? Why hadn't he told her? She thought of the letters, his confession. "I heard the knocks too, Aggie. I ignored them, and I regret it." He'd been afraid, just like her. But he'd chosen silence, and it had haunted him. Maybe that's why the house was calling now, to finish what it started, to make her face what he couldn't. Or maybe it was a test, a chance for her to break the cycle. Either way, she couldn't stay here, cowering in the dark. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "All right," she said aloud, her voice steadier than she felt. "You want me to face you? Fine. But I'm not going down without a fight." The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the scratching resumed, but softer, almost hesitant. Agnes grabbed the journal and flipped through it, searching for clues. There had to be a way out, something the previous owner had missed. One entry caught her eye. December 1st, 1952. "I think I've figured it out. The knocks, they're a pattern, a code. 3 raps, pause, 3 more. Like a heartbeat. Maybe if I respond, it'll let me go. God, I hope so." Agnes's pulse quickened. A pattern? She hadn't tried responding to the knocks, only mimicking them. Maybe that was the key. She waited, and sure enough, the 3 knocks came again, steady and clear. She knocked back 3 times, matching the rhythm. Silence. Then, to her amazement, the door creaked open, just a crack. She rushed forward, pushing it wide, and stumbled back into the passage. The air felt lighter, the darkness less oppressive. She didn't waste a second. She hurried through the passage, her flashlight beam bouncing off the walls, and burst back into the living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and welcoming. She collapsed into a rocking chair, her heart still racing. But as she caught her breath, she realized something. The house was quiet. No knocks, no scratches, no whispers. Just the usual creaks and groans. Had she done it? Had she faced the unknown and won? She glanced at the hole in the wall, the passage now a gaping wound. Part of her wanted to seal it up. Forget this ever happened. But another part knew that wasn't the answer. The house had spoken, and she'd listened. She'd faced her fear, and it had let her go for now. But the journal, the mannequin, the whispers, they were pieces of a puzzle, one she hadn't solved yet. There was more to this, more to uncover. And deep down, she knew the knocks weren't done with her. As if on cue, from somewhere deep in the house, came a single knock, soft, almost gentle. A reminder, a promise. Agnes smiled, a mix of fear and resolve. "All right," she whispered. "I'm ready." Agnes sat in her rocking chair, the journal clutched in her hands, its pages heavy with secrets. The living room was bathed in afternoon light, but it did little to warm the chill that had settled in her bones. That single knock, soft, almost teasing, still lingered in her ears, a whisper from the house that said, "We're not done yet." She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she was certain of one thing: running wasn't an option. Sometimes, friends, life doesn't let you turn away. It knocks until you answer. She opened the journal again, her fingers tracing the frantic scribbles of its previous owner. The words painted a picture of fear, but also of defiance. Someone who'd fought to understand this house, just like her. The last entry, "It's here," haunted her. What had they found? And why had the house let her escape that hidden room, only to taunt her again? She flipped back to the entry about the knocks being a pattern, a code like a heartbeat. That had worked. She'd mimicked the rhythm, and the door had opened. But it felt incomplete, like she'd only scratched the surface. The house was alive in some way, its pulse thrumming through the walls. If she could understand that rhythm, maybe she could unlock its truth. Setting the journal aside, she stood and faced the hole in the wall. The passage gaped like an open mouth, daring her to step back in. Her sledgehammer and crowbar lay nearby, but brute force wouldn't help now. This wasn't about breaking things down, it was about listening, responding. She needed to meet the house on its terms. Agnes closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the house wash over her. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the wind outside, the faint tick of the clock. Then, there it was, 3 knocks, faint but clear, from deep within the passage. She didn't flinch this time. Instead, she knocked back 3 times, steady and deliberate. Silence followed, but the air felt charged, like the house was waiting. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped into the passage, her slippers scuffing the dusty floor. The walls pressed close, but she moved with purpose, her fear tempered by resolve. The passage twisted right, leading to the hidden room with the mannequin. She paused at the door, half expecting it to slam shut again. It didn't. The room was as she'd left it, the mannequin in its chair, its painted smile eerie in the flashlight's glow. She scanned the walls, looking for anything she'd missed. The journal had mentioned a heartbeat, a rhythm. Maybe there was more to the room itself. She tapped the walls lightly, listening for hollow spots. Most sounded solid, but near the mannequin, one section gave a faint echo. Her pulse quickened. She pressed harder, and a small panel shifted, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a leather-bound book, smaller than the journal, its cover embossed with a strange symbol, a circle with 3 lines radiating from the center, like a heartbeat on a monitor. She opened it, her hands trembling. The pages were filled with diagrams and notes, written in a precise, unfamiliar hand. One page stood out, titled "The Pulse of the House." "The house is a vessel," it read, "built on a fault line of the soul. It holds memories, fears, truths left unspoken. The knocks are its heartbeat, calling those who listen. To silence it, you must offer something in return, a truth of your own." Agnes frowned. A fault line of the soul? It sounded like nonsense, but the knocks, the whispers, they weren't random. The house was reaching out, demanding something. But what truth could she offer? She'd lived honestly, or so she thought. Yet George's letters nagged at her, his secrets, his regrets. Maybe her truth was tied to him, to the life they'd built here. She tucked the book under her arm and turned to leave, but a low hum stopped her. It wasn't a knock, it was deeper, like a vibration pulsing through the floor. The mannequin's chair rocked slightly, though no breeze stirred the air. Agnes froze, her skin prickling. The hum grew louder, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. She backed toward the door, but the sound followed, wrapping around her. Then a whisper, her name again. Agnes, soft and urgent, from the walls themselves. She swung the flashlight, but there was nothing, just shadows that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. The hum intensified, shaking the room, and the mannequin's head tilted, its painted eyes locking onto hers. She stumbled back, her heart racing. This wasn't her imagination. The house was awake, and it was watching her. She bolted through the passage, the hum chasing her, vibrating in her chest. She burst into the living room and slammed the passage door shut, though she knew it wouldn't hold whatever was stirring. Panting, she sank into her chair, the leather book still clutched tight. She opened it again, desperate for answers. Another passage caught her eye. The house chooses its keeper. It will test you, push you to face what you've buried. Pass the test, and it will rest. Fail, and it will claim you. A test. That's what this was. The knocks, the whispers, the hidden rooms, they were challenges, forcing her to confront something. But what? She thought of George, his letters, his silence. There was something she didn't know, something he'd hidden. And the house wouldn't let her go until she found it. She stood and paced, her mind churning. The study, she hadn't searched it thoroughly. George's desk, his books, his papers. If there were answers, they'd be there. She grabbed the key and unlocked the study door, stepping into the musty air. The room felt different now, heavier, as if it knew what she was after. She rifled through the desk drawers, finding old receipts, a pipe, a photo of them at their wedding. Then, in a locked drawer, she had to pry it open with a crowbar, she found a small tin box. Inside was a single letter, sealed, addressed to her in George's hand. Her hands shook as she opened it. Aggie, I'm sorry. There's something I never told you, something I should have faced. The house, it's not just ours. It belonged to a man named Elias, a scholar obsessed with the unseen. He built this place to trap something, to hold it. I found his notes, heard the knocks, but I was too afraid to act. I thought if I ignored it, it would leave us alone. I was wrong. If you're reading this, you've heard it too. Don't do what I did. Find Elias's notes. Finish what he started. Love, George. Agnes's eyes burned with tears. George had known about the house's past, about this Elias, and he'd carried that weight alone. She felt a pang of betrayal, but also understanding. He'd wanted to protect her, but in doing so, he'd left her to face this alone. She searched the study again, tearing through shelves until she found a hidden compartment behind a bookcase. Inside was a bundle of papers, Elias's notes. They described the house as a conduit, built to contain an entity, something ancient and restless. The knocks were its attempts to communicate, to find a new keeper. Elias had tried to bind it, but he'd vanished before he could. The final note was a warning. The entity feeds on fear, but it respects truth. Speak your deepest regret, and it may listen. Agnes's regret? She thought of George, of the years she'd spent mourning him instead of living. She'd locked herself away, just like this house. Maybe that was her truth. She'd been afraid to move forward. As she stood there, the hum returned, louder, shaking the floor. 3 knocks followed, booming through the study. The air grew heavy, the shadows twisting. She felt it, the entity, watching, waiting. She gripped Elias's notes, her voice steady. All right, she said. Let's talk. The study trembled around Agnes, the hum growing into a roar that rattled the books on the shelves. 3 knocks boomed again, shaking the floor beneath her feet. She stood in the center of the room, Elias's notes clutched in one hand, George's letter in the other. The air was thick, almost suffocating, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to speak. She knew what she had to do. The entity, whatever it was, fed on fear and silence, but it respected truth. Elias's notes had hinted at this, and George's letter seemed to confirm it. It was time to face her deepest regret, to say it out loud and let the house hear her. But what was that regret? She'd spent years mourning George, locking herself away in this house, drowning in her grief. Was that it? Or was there something deeper? The shadows in the room deepened, swirling like smoke. The hum turned into a low growl, impatient and restless. Agnes took a shaky breath. All right, she said, her voice slicing through the noise. You want my truth? Here it is. She closed her eyes, letting the words pour out. I've been afraid to live without George, afraid to let go of the life we had. I've stayed here, in this house, because it's all I have left of him. But it's not living, it's hiding. And I'm tired of it. I miss him, but I can't keep pretending he's coming back. He's gone, and I need to move on. The growl softened, the shadows pausing mid-swirl. Agnes opened her eyes, her heart thudding in her chest. That's my regret, she went on. I've wasted years clinging to the past instead of embracing what's left of my life. But I'm ready now. I'm ready to let go." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air shifted, the heaviness lifting like a fog burning off in the morning sun. The shadows pulled back, and the hum faded to a whisper. From the walls came a sound, not knocks this time, but a sigh, long and tired, as if the house itself was finally exhaling. Agnes felt a weight slip off her shoulders, a lightness she hadn't felt in years. She smiled, tears stinging her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to the house, to George, or to herself. But just as she turned to leave the study, the knocks crashed back, 3 sharp raps, louder than ever. She froze. Hadn't she done what it wanted? Hadn't she given it her truth? The knocks came again, insistent, almost furious. The floorboards groaned, and the walls seemed to press closer. Panic sparked in her chest. What had she missed? She looked down at Elias's notes, flipping through the pages with trembling hands. One line jumped out at her. "The entity is bound to the house's keepers. It holds their regrets, their unspoken words. To free it, you must free yourself." Free herself? She thought she had. But maybe there was more. Something buried deeper, something she hadn't faced yet. Then it hit her like a thunderclap. George. His secrets, his silence. He'd heard the knocks too, but he'd brushed them off, carried that burden alone. And she'd never pressed him, never asked what was really going on. They'd both been hiding from each other, from the truth. Her regret wasn't just about holding on to the past. It was about the silence between them, the things they'd left unsaid. She'd loved George, but she'd never truly known him, not fully. And now it was too late. The knocks pounded again, rattling the room. Agnes stepped forward, her voice firm. "I'm sorry, George," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't ask, didn't push you to tell me what was wrong. I should have been there for you, like you were for me. I regret that. I regret not knowing you better." The knocks stopped cold. The silence was so complete it rang in her ears, but it felt different this time, expectant, almost alive with possibility. Then, from the walls, came a new sound, a voice, faint but unmistakable. "Aggie." Her breath caught in her throat. It was George's voice, soft and warm, just as she remembered it. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "George." "I'm here," the voice said, resonating through the room. "I've always been here." She sank to her knees, overwhelmed. "Why didn't you tell me? About the house, the knocks?" "I was afraid," he answered, his tone heavy with sorrow. "Afraid you'd think I was losing it. Afraid you'd leave. I thought I could handle it alone. But I was wrong. I'm sorry, Aggie." She shook her head, smiling through her tears. "It's all right. I understand. But you don't have to stay here anymore. You can rest now. We both can." The air shimmered, and for a fleeting second, she thought she saw him, George, standing by the desk, his face gentle and familiar. He nodded, his form dissolving like mist in the dawn. "Thank you," he whispered. "I love you." "I love you too," she said, her voice cracking. And then he was gone. The room settled, the shadows vanishing entirely. The house felt different now, lighter, freer, as if a massive burden had been lifted. Agnes stood slowly, brushing the tears from her cheeks. She knew what came next. She gathered Elias's notes, the journal, and George's letters, carrying them to the fireplace in the living room. One by one, she fed them to the flames, watching the pages curl and turn to ash. The house didn't need to hold these secrets anymore. Neither did she. As the last paper burned away, she heard it, one final knock, soft and tender, like a goodbye. She smiled, knowing it was the house's way of letting go. The next morning, Agnes woke to sunlight pouring through the windows, the house quiet and calm. She made her tea, humming a tune George used to love. For the first time in years, she felt unburdened, ready to step into the world beyond these walls. She decided to call her granddaughter, Lily, and invite her over. Maybe they could sort through George's old things together, share some stories, make new memories. The house was still her home, but it wasn't a cage anymore. It was just a house now, with creaky floors and sunny corners, a place to live, not to hide. As she reached for the phone, she glanced at the wall, now patched up neatly by Mr. Jenkins, who'd finally stopped by to help. "Just an old house settling," he'd said with a wink. She'd smiled and nodded. Some things were better left unsaid, but deep down, she knew the truth. The house had been a vessel, carrying the regrets and fears of those who'd lived there. And she'd set herself free, by facing what she'd kept buried. It wasn't easy, but growth never is. Sometimes, friends, you have to tear down walls, literal or not, to let the light in. Agnes took a sip of tea, savoring the warmth. The knocks were gone, the whispers silent. The house was at peace, and so was she. And that, she realized, was the greatest truth of all.